Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sentinel. Today, I've got another long episode, and this is a very special guest that I think the viewers will enjoy listening to. And he's a retired Marine, highly successful in the Marine Corps, very well known throughout the Marine Corps for his leadership abilities and for his combat experience. And Beyond that, when he retired from the Marine Corps, he also joined a publicly held company at a very high level and was wildly successful there as well. And as a result of that, became passionate about leadership. He wrote several leadership books, and I consider him to be an expert on leadership. This is a long episode. It's going to take about 2 hours. And Unfortunately, we didn't really get to the other half of this discussion where I wanted to take his leadership experiences in the Marine Corps and how they apply to the corporate world and what are the differences and what are the pitfalls that young officers and retired service members should look out for. This first part is really about his Marine career, and it's really worth watching, especially towards the end when he kind of opens up and talks to us about his true feelings of why he retired from the Marine Corps and which way the services were heading. Watch this to the end. I have him back on this program to do the second half of the show, where we're going to discuss about the differences of military leadership and corporate leadership, and how the two interacted in his career. And I would highly recommend that you listen to this episode. And then, if you're so inclined, go out and take a look at his books if you're interested in leadership topics. This is definitely a must-see episode for young officers and staff NCOs because it's all about leadership. That's what we're going to talk about. So let's dig into it with Michael Ettore, retired Marine major, and he also happened to be a drill instructor. And at that time, he was the youngest drill instructor in the Marine Corps. A fascinating story, a fascinating person, and somebody that I highly respect. And I think after this episode, you'll see why I respect him so much. And I look forward to doing the subsequent episode on this leadership series that we've started. So let's dig into it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sentinel. Today I've got a really, really exciting guest, somebody that I have followed in his footsteps for decades in the Marine Corps, and he truly is a legend. His name is Michael Ettore, and I'm going to briefly go over his biography and just talk about it because I know there's certain things that he won't bring up. But first of all, I want to welcome you, sir, to Sentinel Podcast. It's really quite an honor, and it's great to have you here.
Well, thank you so much, Hassan. I appreciate the invite. It's an honor for me too. I've been hearing about you for a long, long time, and everybody kept telling me, "Do you know Hassan? You were a West Coast guy, I think, primarily."
I
And
started on the West Coast and I came to the East Coast
okay.
later on.
Yeah, so our paths never crossed. We've never met in person, but everybody that ever mentioned said, "You would like this guy. You're you're his kind of guy," and vice versa. And those are people that I trusted. And then as I learned more of your story and listened to your podcast, and they're absolutely right. Heard a lot about you as a battalion commander in combat, and I told somebody, I said, I'd be honored to be an ammo humper for this guy. He's out there kicking ass. So let me tell you, I appreciate the lofty introduction and all that, but I'm just being real when it comes to the scale of actual merit and all that. I think you're heavier than me, and that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. So
Follow in your footsteps. That's the way I see it. Ladies and gentlemen, so the purpose of this podcast is really talk about leadership, and I consider Mike Ettore to be the pinnacle of leadership, not only in the Marine Corps but also in the corporate world, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. And I consider him to be a leadership expert. Now he may disagree with me because I've read his books. He sent me 7 of his books that he's written that PhDs haven't written. And there's a lot of PhDs out there, tooling around and, selling their leadership and all that, but they don't have the experience. Mike Ettore's got the experience, and we're going to talk about his experience. Now, he claims to be an expert leader. I disagree with him. I think that he's a leadership expert. And he's also a legendary Marine. So let's talk about that a little bit. 1974, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. And in '76, he was the youngest drill instructor to pass DI school at MCRD San Diego. Am I correct on that, sir?
You are correct.
And I love MCRD San Diego. I did 15 cycles down there, pumped through
Yeah.
5,000 troops. I absolutely love it. And so he was 20 years old. And hopefully he'll tell us the story about, after he graduated his first recruit training platoon, he was invited to a bar with all the drill instructors. And they kind of set him up because he wasn't old enough to drink. He was only, and the drinking age in California was 21 at the time.
Yeah.
And his fellow drill instructors and the company staff had him ordered him a glass of milk, which I really found fun, and I can see it happening. That's the sick humor that we have down at the drill field. Nonetheless, so 1978, he decided to exit the Marine Corps and attended college at East Stroudsburg University and was commissioned in the Marine Corps in 1982, 83 time frame, went to TBS IOC, another infantry officer. And Mike's got combat out the wazoo. I mean, talk about, he served in Grenada, he served in Beirut, and he served in Desert Storm with 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. And some incredible stories he has. But today we're not going to talk about combat stories. We're going to talk about leadership. But I just want to highlight that. And then there's a very prestigious award or a trophy that's given to Marine officers, ground combat, specifically infantry officers. It's called the Leftwhich Trophy. And one of these is given out every year. And in 1992, Mike was the recipient of the Leftwhich Trophy. This is like the pinnacle for a company grade officer in the Marine Corps, and something that only a few Marine officers have received. So he's got obviously very highly decorated, and this is why I wanted to kind of just talk about it because I knew he wouldn't bring it up. He's got 2 Bronze Stars with V's and 3 combat action ribbons. I mean, think about that. This guy earned them. And then in 1998, he decided to retire. And maybe in a subsequent podcast, we'll talk about that, unless he wants to talk about it in this. So he had 24 years of service. Now, here's the kicker. So he retired on his own as a major. He had a wide open career. And right before we started recording, he could have been a general officer. And I said he could have been the Commandant of the Marine Corps. I mean, this guy's got a track record that's just mind blowing to me. And so in 1998, he retires, and then 1999 joins K-Force. It's a publicly held company, and starts their director of leadership development, and then eventually becomes vice president of operations, then the chief information officer, and then takes over their entire IT. The reason they wanted him to take this over was because of his leadership. And then he retires from there after 15 years with K-Force, at the C-suite level. I mean, that's a big deal. It's not a joke. So he's very successful in the Marine Corps, very successful in corporate, publicly held corporate company. And the reason I say that he's a leadership expert is because PhDs write books, but they don't have the practical experience. Mike has the practical experience in the Marine Corps, hands-on experience, drill instructor, infantry officer, combat, and then he comes out and he's got practical experience on the corporate side. So he's definitely an authority. And I'll put a link to his books. I would highly recommend that you take a look at them and read them, because if you're into leadership, and especially if you're a young officer or even a serving officer currently in the military, you got to read them, because he goes through this leadership and pulls these ideas and vignettes together, and they start making sense. And like, I'd say, holy smokes. It's right up there. I'm telling you, it's something that you have to read. So in addition to that, he's got the Fidelis Leadership Group. You can see the logo right above Mike's head. And he also does podcasts, and I'll put some links to his podcasts as well, because they're all leadership related and they're very, very interesting. So on that note, Mike, I would like you, if I glossed over everything because I speak fast and because when I get excited, I would like you to start out and talk about your Ettore origin story. Where are you from? Why did you join the Marine Corps? And how did your career progress? And then what happened? The floor
I'll
is
do
yours.
that. I do want to make one caveat remark to something earlier. I truly appreciate, your mention of the awards. I wouldn't have mentioned it, like most good Marines won't. But I want to clarify something, especially for the younger fellas out there listening that was, oh my God, 3 combat action ribbons. And I'm here to tell you that not all 3 were the same. And I got to tell you, Grenada, in hindsight, was over. Hostilities were over after the first morning.
Right.
We just overwhelmed them, and believe it or not, I mean, my company really didn't get in any firefights. We were just moving all over the island, and the bad guys were militia. They ran like hell. Now, I will tell you, the Army got a bad rap in Grenada, and in some cases, rightfully so, especially at the battalion or at the brigade level and above. The battalion commanders, they had some studs. But, and General Vesey made that famous combat. What the hell is going on down here? We got 3 Marine rifle companies running roughshod over 2/3 of the island, and we got 5,000 paratroopers sitting on their ass at Salinas Airport. Well, that wasn't the battalion commanders or the captains or the sergeants. That was their senior leaders. But the Rangers and elements of the 82nd, they were in some serious fighting that first morning. And I mean serious fighting. And I feel compelled to say that. Back to the combat action stuff, I honestly don't think the total weight of those 3 combat action ribbons are even close to being the equal of some lance corporal that was in either Fallujah or Ramadi or Helmland province. The ribbon looks the same, and the criteria is the criteria. And you and I both know people that rate it and never got it. And then we got people that had no business getting it, and they've got it with stars on it. So my advice to the younger guys is don't be like most of us are when we're young. We are bedazzled by that stuff.
Right.
Bedazzled. And it ain't always what it seems on the surface. So with that, I'll get off my soapbox, but I felt compelled to say that. I think we have mostly older guys here, and I'm sure they're nodding their heads, nodding their heads. The Vietnam guys, they're out there scrapping, at some of these major battles, Quezon and all that. And they're seeing guys from no fault of their own decide to staff jobs or high level commands. They come back, and these guys are packed with valor awards and combat act. And so it's always been that way since the Roman times, the inequity of awards. So anyway, back to me. So my origin story is I was born in 1956. My mother and father were both Army veterans. They met in the Army. And my dad did 3 years. My mom did 2. They met at Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, and it was during the Korean War. But my dad did not deploy to Korea. They sent them to Germany for a year. My mom got married, and so they got married in I think 52. Had my older sister in 54, me in 56, my younger sister in 58. My dad worked for the government. And I was born in Schenectady, New York. I caught crap for that my entire Marine Corps career. What's your home of record? Schenectady, New York. Like, where the hell's Schenectady, And I couldn't live that down, as well as East Stroudsburg. Like, where is it? What, East Stroudsburg, what the hell is that? So anyway, Schenectady is the birthplace of General Electric, the original General Electric factory. And my grandfather, Giuseppe Ettore, who came in 1898, he worked there. And so my dad grew up there, and that's where I was born. We lived there for 10 years. And my dad worked at the Army Depot right there in, I think it was Rotterdam, New York. Then he got transferred to New Jersey, and you'll all recognize this name. He got transferred to Picatinny Arsenal in New Jersey, northern New Jersey. And it's the part of New Jersey, Assad, if you and others listening to this had never been there, I went to school with dairy farmers. It's the upper northwest corner of New Jersey. And this is the day when we went to school with shotguns in the back of our pickup on the window. Remember the gun racks? And they gave us 3 days off in the fall for deer hunting, and it was a very rural area. It was great. I loved it. A great place to grow up and all that. So moved there when I was 10 years old, went to public schools, graduated in 1974, went in the Marine Corps at the age of 17. and was enlisted for 4 years. I do want to say one thing that's really relevant to my life. I started wrestling in the third grade, and that sport, I continued that all the way through Division I wrestling. Wasn't very good, but I loved the sport. And that sport, if it wasn't for that sport, I don't think I would have had the guts to try to be a Marine. And it just taught me so many life lessons. And it always goes back to wrestling and the Marine Corps. Everything I've done in my life since then was the fact that I was a Marine, and I would have never been a Marine without that sport. Had a great coach. I consider a second father. So anyway, I graduated high school 17. I think it was a Wednesday at Paris Island. I was at Paris Island the next Monday. By 06 on the next, and that following day on Tuesday, I wondered what in the hell had I done.
Yeah.
But I loved, and boot camp was much different back then than it is now. And of course, everybody says that, for the last 120 some years and all that. But I knew about halfway through, I love this. I am in my element. And believe it or not, even as a recruit, I just loved it. And I knew I'm going to stay in this organization for as long as I can. I found a home.
Right.
And that proved to be true. I just loved it. And, I was raised in an era, and hopefully they still do this, where the highest honor is just being called a Marine. And that's all I ever wanted to be, was a Marine. And when I went in the Marine Corps, Assad, there were many World War II vets. There was a ton of Korea vets, and Vietnam vets were all over the place. And if you do the math, 1974, World War II, well, what happened was a lot of these guys did 2, 3, 4, 5 years in the Pacific, and they got out. And what
Right.
a lot of people don't know is that when the Korean War kicked, these guys were back home. They're GI Bill. They'd started businesses. They got jobs. They got kids, and they all got recalled for Korea. And so
Right.
there's guys in my hometown that did 8 years in the military, like 4 years and, 4 or 5 years in World War II and 3 years in Korea. And then they went home. Well, some of those guys with broken time after Korea just said, you know what, I'm staying. And then, of course, they went, and those were the guys that I met. They had broken time. There were very few that had continuous service from, World War II. But I got to tell you, when you're a PFC and you're very impressionable, and your first sergeant is an Iwo Jima veteran,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he's got a Japanese bayonet scar running the length of his face, you think twice about going to ask that guy if you can go to sick bay. They did not tolerate fools or weaklings whatsoever. And I just loved them. We PT, and I said, they got chunks missing out of their legs and all that. And they're outrunning me. I'm 18 years old, and these guys are in their 40s, which is ancient to me back then. And they're outrunning me. And right there, I decided I want to be an old fit guy one day. I want to be that. I want to be that way. I see people back home that are their age and they look like crap. I don't want to do that. So I just spent my whole career, Assad, my whole career hoping to live up to the legacy that those guys put ahead of me. And I get very, very sentimental about it. I mean, I just wanted to be, I was proud to wear the uniform. And to this day, I am just so proud. The accomplishments are great. Most of that, to be honest with you, was right spot, right time. But I will be a Marine until my last breath. It got a hold of me. People say, Mike, what, non-Marines, I'm sure they ask, what the hell do they do to you down there at boot camp? You guys love it I don't know. It just happens. There's no class on it. You just absorb it and it becomes who you are. So I joined the Marine Corps. I was a grunt combat engineer too. I went to the demolition school, and then did a couple of years in the fleet, and then I went to Marine Barracks, Bangor, Washington. Very pivotal for me. You'll probably recognize this name. My first lieutenant there was a guy named Jim Battellini,
Yep.
who
Colonel.
retired as a major general. And so Jim, we're still in touch, very close friends. He was the best man at my wedding. And so he sees 18-year-old Mike Ettore. He knows me. And back then, that little Marine barracks, right now it's a sprawling complex. It was a little tiny place back then. It was beautiful in the Northwest, west of Seattle, across the Puget Sound. We used to store our weapons and our wall lockers, M14s with ammo and all that. It was a different era. And we both lifted weights. A lot of Marines didn't lift back then. And he used to drive me. I didn't have a car. He used to drive me down to another base. I forget what Bremerton, naval base Bremerton. And it was a weight room there. And it was always professional. Yes, sir. No, sir. And we'd lift and I'd spot him. He'd spot me. He was a physical stud too. I mean, that guy was strong and he could run like a reindeer and he was a big guy. And at one point, and I was surrounded by great NCOs. My platoon sergeant, I mentioned him in my book, is a guy named Ross Carter. 3 tours in Vietnam, badly wounded at the end of each tour. And I want to say for about a 7-year period, his duty stations were Vietnam, Beaufort Naval Hospital, Vietnam, Beaufort Naval Hospital, Vietnam, Beaufort Naval. So he ended up spending more time in the hospital than he did for 3 tours of Vietnam. He always got wounded in like the last 45 days of his tour. He had missing fingers. He was lucky to be alive. And that guy and the other staff NCOs, we had a sergeant major from Korea and Vietnam named Angel Carrasco. And that guy was he was not to be trifled with. He was a former, Mexican gang member. And I remember he had a snake tattooed around his arm. And on the top of his hand, it was like a cobra's head. It was just, he's a snake. And he had these little teardrops, it was some kind of gang symbol or something on his eye, but great Marine. And they set the bar so high for me as an NCO. They demanded a lot. And so I was a very, very young corporal. And I got promoted. Rank was much different there. Younger guys today aren't going to believe it. But after Vietnam, if you just stayed out of trouble, and could look good in uniform and can do well on a PFT, you were going to be a sergeant before your 4-year enlistment ended. It's just the way it was back then. And I know now we got lance corporals with almost 2 hash marks and all that. It's not their fault. Sign of the times, So I just happened to hit it right. But I made sergeant 19 months into the Marine Corps. So I was a 19-year-old sergeant. And these guys didn't cut me any slack. They demanded a lot of me, so I loved it. I mean, it was basically being in leadership school at that barracks, really a formative time for me. And then, so I did about a year there, and then there was a shortage of drill instructors. And the admin chief was a guy named Gunny Darwin. And he had just come from the drill field. He said, "Come in here, Ettore." He goes, "Hey, you ever thought about being a drill instructor?" I said, "Yeah, actually, I did think about that. I'd love it, but I'm too young. You got to be 21. He goes, "We can get you a waiver if you want to go." And I said, "Yeah, will they do that?" He goes, "I think they'll do it." And so long story made short, the command endorsed it. And here I am reporting into DI school. There was about I would say a 65-70% Vietnam vets, and the other 30 were not. Yeah. And each, they're broken down into squads, as you know. There's squads in DI school. My squad instructor was a gunnery sergeant, a Korean War vet named Hector Mata. And he was a character. He married a rich woman. He used to call her the fat lady. And he was a great guy. And she was rich. And he'd drive in. He's a gunnery sergeant back then. Right. He's driving in a Lincoln Continental Cadillac and all that. He was funnier than hell. I honestly don't think he could read that well. I'm not sure I don't think he was a high school graduate. But in his initial talk, I'm just so young. I'm a boot. And he said, "I'm, Hector Mata, blah, blah, blah. I enlisted in 1949 and did Korea. And then I got out, became an alcoholic. And believe it or not, one of my recruits found me one day around 1960, drunk on a park bench. And he talked me, 'Hey, guy, get up. Hey, you're my drill instructor. Hey, get up,' and cleaned me up and said, 'You got to go back in the Marine Corps.' I went in and did Vietnam, and then I get him. And he goes, 'I have had 4 tours as a drill instructor, not counting this one right here. And my first tour was 1956. And I'm like a stupid dummy. I said, 'Hey, Gunny, that's the year I was born.' And he just looked at me. He said, 'Thanks. What's your name?' So I said, I'm Sergeant Ettore, and that guy never could get my name right. He called me Ellinger, Ettore, Escort. He never, ever got it right. I just loved it. In fact, I got out and went to college. I went back to visit my buddies, And I'm walking into PX, and here comes Gunny Mata. What's he say? Ellinger, how are you? He still couldn't get my name right after all these years. So anyway, I get through DI school, and I want to clarify something about the technicality of being the youngest drill instructor. I wasn't the youngest drill instructor in the Marine ever. You know, there was a tradition in World War II, all the way up through Korea, maybe afterwards, that they would actually keep like a PFC, like the guide or something. They would keep that guy back, and they would
Ah,
make him a drill instructor. And so it's not uncommon for the 1940s and 50s to see recruit platoons with 2 or 3 drill instructors, staff sergeants, sergeants, and then you've got a PFC
yep.
standing up there. And often those guys were the kind of heavies, you know what I mean? They were still acting as the recruit guys and kicking some ass, literally.
Did they wear
And
the
so
did they wear the DI cover, or were they just troop handlers?
no, not that came in after the Ribbon Creek incident, which I believe happened in 56. Prior to that, they just wore a soft cover and
Okay.
and a cartridge belt with a pistol,
Yep.
45. You'll see these old pictures. And then as a result of Ribbon Creek, they did some reforms. That's when the series officers started, and they gave them the smoky and said, prestige and all of this. That's when it started. But it's not uncommon to see those recruit platoons like that. And so when I graduated, and they made fun of me. I mean, it was like, all right, Friday's inspection will be Charlie's with ribbon, Ettore, that is Charlie's and ribbon for you, because I only had the national offense. I didn't even have a good conduct ribbon yet. And so they used to howl
Yeah.
big time at me, just make good natured fun, it wasn't, I loved it. And so when I graduated DI school, my battalion sergeant major called me in one day. He goes, "Hey, I was talking to all the other sergeants major here, and I called my buddy at Paris Island. You're right now, you are the youngest drill instructor serving in the Marine Corps. But I also knew there were a few others out there that were only a few months older than me. So I don't want to make it sound like there were all those grizzled vets out there
Right.
and one baby DI out there. There were a bunch of us babies out there. I just happened to be the youngest by, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months. I don't know.
Right.
And I am still in touch with one of them. That guy stayed in and become a sergeant major and all that. So there's an asterisk behind that. Now, was I a very young drill instructor? Absolutely. Did I love being a drill instructor? One of the best jobs I've ever had. I absolutely loved it. Didn't have a wife, didn't have a steady girlfriend. There were 78 training days, and I'd let the drill instructors go home, and I would probably stay in that duty 65 days of that cycle, because my theory was let the married guys go home. And if I'm with them at the night too, I could just keep the heat on them 24/7. And I thought I had a big, huge white sack, and I think I had 3 full weeks of laundry. And when it got low, I would pull up to this laundry and give it to them. It was the stereotypical Chinese laundry.
Sure.
And they said, come back tomorrow. I come back tomorrow, that whole bag, the t-shirts would be folded and all that, I had all extra. And so I didn't need to go anywhere. I lived out of my duty hut. I had a BEQ room, but I never stayed there. I was basically living in a duty hut, just loved it. And it was a great thing. And another example where the peer pressure in the best sense, and I hope this is still the same. DI school was the most professional school I ever went through. Better than TBS, better than anything. And I never went to NCO school or squad leader school. The Marine Corps was such that I absorbed that leadership and went out there as a drill instructor and was able to do it, and had a lot of good mentors. I don't know if you ever ran into a senior sergeant major named Holub, Sergeant Major Holub. I think he finished up as FMM PAC, Sergeant Major. Great guy. He was my series chief. Another guy was, you might have been there maybe at the time you were at MCRD, Gunnery Sergeant Jarrell, who did a few tours at Paris Island. He was the first sergeant and went back as a sergeant major. And so I just was surrounded by great leadership. Yeah, I will say this. It was also the first I'd been exposed to so many superior officers today, because I really hadn't been anywhere, that this is the first time that I saw the bell curve of officers. I saw unbelievably good ones and then some average ones. And then I ran into a few. It's like, how the hell did that guy get through? Which we
Right.
know is the real Marine Corps. You know, there's a bell curve. We've got our 10% too. And it's not that they were bad. It's just that they weren't up to snuff by everybody else. And so Battellini at the barracks had planted the seed. Have you ever thought about being an officer? And I said, well, thank you, sir. But man, I really suck at math. He goes, well, how bad? He goes, I like bad. I suck at math, And he goes, hey, I don't know if you know this. You don't have to take math in college. You can be a history major. You can be a phys ed major. You might have to take one class, but can you add and subtract? I'm like, yeah. He said, well, you take a bonehead math class, you knock that out, and you'll focus on half of these electives, which you'll do fine because you're smart and you can write well, and the rest of them you're going to love. So they planted the seed, and he said, listen, look at this barracks here. And by now he was a captain. He was the guard officer. So he's probably got 5 lieutenants there. He goes, I'm just telling you, you're one of the best officers we have. You're one of the best lieutenants we have, except you're not a lieutenant.
Right.
And you're never going to be a lieutenant until you get a college degree. So there's no doubt in my mind you could do it. You're already doing it. Just think about it, because you've got a lot. There's nothing wrong with being a staff NCO, but you've got a lot of potential. You're one of those guys that I think that could make the transition well and put the seed. And then when I went to MCRD, that's when I realized I got to do this. I want to go to college for 2 reasons. I want to wrestle. I loved it. I wanted to go wrestle. And I knew I was going to graduate and I was going to do one of 2 things. I thought I was going to go be a high school wrestling coach, or I was going to go back in the Marine Corps as a commissioned officer. And so I went through regular OCS, PLC combined. I think it was 10 weeks my junior summer. Ironically, many of the drill instructors there, I think we called them squad instructors, were on the drill field with me, So I was running on the trail back there one time, an individual run, and we see two guys coming with staff shirts on. And I'm like, oh, I know both of these guys. So I'm a recruit, shaved head. I'm just, candid. I'm running toward them. They come, good morning, sergeant instructors. And I keep running. And about 10 yards later, I hear, stop. And I stopped. I said, turn around. And they walk toward me. They're looking at me, and they turn me around. They look at my name, and they said, they recognize me. They're like, what the hell are you doing here? I said, well, I'm going to be an officer. And they honestly, one of them looked at me with revulsion and literally they said, why?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? You were already a young staff sergeant. Like, what? I take a step down. I said, well, I was afraid I wasn't going to make gunny. So it's easier to become a second lieutenant, So it was an interesting experience in OCS. My platoon sergeant actually got relieved halfway through. He got a DUI.
Wow.
And my platoon commander called me in and he said, look, they're not replacing him. So you got it. You're still a candidate, but you can help these guys get through. You can prep them for inspections and help teach them drill and all that. And that's what I did. I was still a candidate, and I loved it, got through with it. And then graduated college, and about halfway through college, I had to make a decision. And I realized, I can always go back and be a wrestling coach. But I was reaching the maximum age for commissioning, and they were very inflexible back then, and it was do or die. And I said, I'm going to go back in the Marine Corps. So the rest is, like you said, history. I went to TBS, 1982, Echo Company of 82, went to IOC, joined 2-8, in, I think, February of 83. The Beirut operation had started, and 2-8 was the first BLT in there.
Yes.
And so when I got to 2-8, they had already been to Beirut, and now there's another battalion or cycled in, and we were going back. We knew we were going back because only 8th Marines had that mission back then. To the envy of the rest of the Marine Corps, that was all that was going on since maybe the Mayaguez and a couple brush fires after Vietnam. But I mean, I do remember the days when lieutenant colonels had 2 ribbons. I remember Jim Mattis as a lieutenant colonel with 3 ribbons, 3. And I don't think any of them were personal awards, you know? And so it was a different era. And so I got to 2-8. They XO's really nice. He goes, okay, we're gonna bring in a battalion commander. I don't know who this guy is. Report to the battalion commander. I don't know his name. So he's sitting behind a desk. I'm in alphas. I walk in, and back then I was still kind of swole. I was still kind of jacked up, you know, D1 wrestler. Sir, Lieutenant Ettore reporting his order. He looks at me. He's got this West Southern drawl. Do a right face. And XO's there. And I'm like, right face? He goes, do an about face. So now my,
Yeah.
other side is facing. I'm like, what the hell is this, All right, right face again. So now I'm facing him, and he looks at the XO. He goes, you think he's bigger than Zenny? Is Zenny, you think he's bigger? And the XO said, no, I think Zenny's bigger. No, I think Zenny's chest is bigger. And I'm thinking, who the hell is Zenny? I'd
Yeah.
never heard of him. Well, if you knew General Zenny back there, then he was a big, strong guy,
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so General Zenny was bigger and stronger than me, But I'm thinking, who the hell is Zenny? And I didn't know. And I remember a couple of days later, I asked him, who the hell is Zenny? Oh, he used to be the regimental commander. And it was Ray Smith, General Ray Smith, Major General Toole Smith was the battalion commander I'm talking about. I don't know who he is. But that Friday, that maybe this is a Tuesday or so, that Friday we're having a PME. Officers, Charlies,
Right.
enlisted or doing their thing. And it was tradition back then to have a
Sure.
morning PT morning PME and then officers call later on in the afternoon. It was a great tradition. So we're all there, and I'm sporting 3 ribbons, which was kind of packed out for the day, and I mean everybody else has got nothing. The lieutenant's got nothing. They haven't made the sea service yet or anything. Here comes the battalion commander, and he walks in, and I know ribbons, and I'm
Yeah.
looking at
Yeah.
this guy. I'm looking at this guy. He walks in, he's tall and rangy, and he's got a Navy Cross, 2
I know.
Silver Stars, a couple of Bronze Stars with V, 3 Purple Hearts, Navy Com with V, Navy Achievement with V. And now he's got my attention like, I don't know who this guy is, but he's a gunfighter. And my captain said, oh, no, he's kind of famous. He was at TBS when we went through years ago. We loved him. They call him Toole Smith. He's just great. You're very lucky to be here. And then when I went around the base, I would go visit my buddies and, sir, this is my battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Smuckatelli. And he goes, hey, Lieutenant, hey, who are you with? I said, sir, I'm with 2-8. And everybody, oh, Ray Smith's battalion. Oh, Ray Smith, everybody, Ray Smith. And I'm like, this guy's somebody, and he certainly was. And that guy gave us PMEs tactically, but more so, and equally so leadership wise. I'll never forget this. This is the first PME, very newly formed battalion, Assad, and you'll appreciate this. He said, listen, we're in the battalion headquarters right here, Camp Geiger. And he said, some of you have been trained to run your companies by me. Oh, aren't you impressed? Echo companies running TT. He said, I'm not telling you not run by me,
Right.
but it doesn't mean anything to me. Run them, but don't try and impress me. And he said, furthermore, we're going back to Beirut. A lot of married guys out there, and we're going to the field. And we went to the field. We left for the field usually Monday afternoon, and we came out of the field Friday morning. That was pretty routine back then, And he said, so they're not going to be here during the week. So Friday, clean weapons, they're gone. And if we are in garrison, God help you, if I drive by your company area and those Marines aren't out of here by 1600. And
Right.
he said, because if you can't get it done by 1600, you and I need to talk. Well, you could see I looked at the captains and they were like, because back then there was a lot of guys that say, I'm the battalion commander. I come in at 5:30 in the morning and I leave at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. I expect everybody, officers, to be in before me and leave after me. In that one fell swoop, that set the tone for that
Right.
artificiality, just
Right.
BS, And so this guy was a great leader, and I learned a lot from him. We're doing a whole pre-deployment workups. There was an operation that was coming up called Solid Shield. I don't know if you remember that. It was a big exercise, big joint exercise, Solid Shield, Navy, and even the Army played. And he sent almost every squad leader in the battalion to squad leader school, which was unheard of because you got this big exercise. And he goes, "We're going to do fine." He goes, "Listen to me." And he told everybody, all the leaders, he said, "I'm not the most important guy in this battalion, and neither are you. And neither is any, the most important leader in this battalion is the squad leaders and fire team leaders. And we'll get through this exercise, but we're sending every single one of them to the squad leader school because they got a lot of quotas because everybody else is keeping their squad leaders because they want to look good." And so we missed our squad leaders for a couple of months. It was a really good school. They came back, they knew their stuff. It was impressive, you know? So that told me something right there. And as far as leadership goes, you know this, Assad, and I suspect you were the same way. Some company commanders um, bank on their lieutenants, they bank on their officers. These
Right.
are the guys that are going to drive this ship. Others lean more toward officer and staff NCOs. These are our sled dogs, you know. I learned from him and others, officers are great, staff NCOs are great, they're irreplaceable, but I only got like 5 officers and maybe 7 or 8 staff NCOs. When I look at those NCO billets, I got like 40 of them. And if I can get at least 30 of them marching in the same direction, unlimited power. And I had been a sergeant, so I knew what a good sergeant was capable of if he'd been given a reputation to live up to. They won't disappoint you for lack of effort. They may goof, do something. I was young, made mistakes and all that. So I became kind of well known for, well, high bar for officers, high bar for staff NCOs, but we're all going to die anyway if we get in some serious stuff.
Right.
And that lance corporal, that corporal and a corporal's sergeant's billet and all that, that's the guy that needs to go and find that radio, the only radio that can really talk to pick it off the dead fact and save that battalion. There's all sorts of stories that those things have really done. So I remember Ray Smith saying, "Look, you lieutenants, I'm impressed by you guys, but I got to tell you what really impresses me. I don't care how good your platoon is when you're there. All that really matters is how good they are when you've got a big bullet hole in your head,
Right.
because that's probably going to happen to some of you. We get involved in some serious stuff. So can they function without you?" And I got to tell you, son, we go on exercises, and that guy, he was one of the early maneuver warfare guys with General Gray, early adopter. You would go, he would mess with us all the time. I mean, you would go on the helos and land, and like, where the hell's my platoon sergeant? Well, he had already sent the sergeant major to take my platoon sergeant away. I didn't know it. Or a whole stick of my Marines not there. He would land us in the wrong LZ, and then he wouldn't talk to us. And I wanted to see if we were going to sit there and wait or if we were going to take action and achieve the commander's intent. Well, I can't talk to anybody, but I know we're supposed to go down there and establish a blocking position. And early on, we had a couple captains that were put in the wrong LZ, wrong area, and they did sit there for hours. And we got back and did an after action. He didn't shoot her ass, but he made a very point. He goes, "What were you waiting for?"
Right.
Yeah, we heard you. I just told everybody, don't answer him. So I know I'm rambling, but I learned so many leadership lessons from this guy
Think that
that
happened to you in Grenada when you got put in the wrong LZ?
well, that happened in Grenada. So he did this all the time. Like
Yeah.
he would put us in wrong LZs. They wouldn't answer, blah, 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 during training.
Yeah.
And so when, we're getting a little ahead here, but when I did Grenada, I was in a helo company, one of 2 helo companies, and we were going to go secure a little village called Grenville, the
Yeah.
northeast coast, and Echo Company was going to do Pearls Airport up north. So we're flying in. Echo Company had preceded us by maybe 10 minutes. And I got a cranial on, and one of the pilots said, "Hey, Echo Company had a hot LZ. They're shooting up there. I'm like, okay. So we're rocked and loaded. Now, the intelligence for Grenada was bad. We had no maps. We had some grainy pictures from high altitude reconnaissance aircraft. So I was expecting to be put down in a big, huge field
Mm-hmm.
outside of Grenville. So we would form up and tactically move into Grenville and see if there's any opposition, secure that checkpoint. So I'm expecting a big field, and we're flying low level, and it's dawn, like not even dawn yet. Not dark, but not dawn. It's darker than it is light. We're flying nap of the earth to the ocean, which they didn't do much. I looked out the window, and the ocean was maybe 10 feet from us, and we're there. I could see the shadow of the helicopter and see the other helos, and I was in the first bird. And all of a sudden, I see it. I'm looking out through the windshield, and I can see palm trees, and we're flying lower than them. So I figured the field's behind that. So sure enough, I feel the bird go up, and the bird goes up, and then we go down. Bam, a little bit of a hard landing. The helo bounces, and the crew chief says, "Go." I look out the window. We are in a walled-in soccer stadium. It's not a big field. They put me down in a wheel, like a soccer stadium. I mean, I'm like, oh, one guy with an AK, would tear us up. And I'm like, and the pilot was the squadron commander, Granville Amos, very experienced guy. And he just said, go. Now, they didn't explain to me, hey, we found out the Cobras flew over it. There's high tension wires all over it. We can't land there. We're putting in this LZ. It's that stadium. It's right next to Grenville. So they put me down. I'm in a soccer stadium. I don't know where I'm at.
Right.
Fortunately, there's no bad guys there. And I remember thinking as we were running it out, I honestly thought, really, Colonel? Seriously?
Right.
You're doing it now? Now, really? This isn't an extra. I honestly thought he was screwing with us again to see how would we react. But because he did it so routinely, I just knew, deal with it. So we fanned the Marines out. Second bird comes in. It's the company commander, a guy named Mike Dick. He comes out and he says, Mike, do you have any idea where we're at? I'm like, no idea at all, sir. So we put out security. We start seeing some locals peek at us, waving, come on in here. They spoke English, like, where is this Grenville? Yes, it is. And we went in there, and there was no bad guys, and we found a gas station. So we broke into the gas station, and there were maps there of the island. So we gave some maps out, and now we had a little bit of where we were at. Other than that, we got so lucky during that operation. So I think we stayed there, Assad, 6 or 7 days. The Army kept pouring in because they were going to take over the island. And so let me back up a little bit. We actually got on ships to deploy. We were going to replace 1-8. And this is pre-BLT bombing. So we were going to be 1-8's replacement. The second day of the trip, we're heading east, obviously, to go to the Med. The second day, I go up in the flight deck after morning chow, and I'm looking at the sun like, we're not moving east. We're going south.
Yeah.
And my battalion XO is there, and he goes, yeah, we're going south. I'm like, what? He goes, we're going to some place called Grenada, and it's off the northern edge of South America, And we had no idea where it was. Somebody found a dictionary, an encyclopedia in the ship's library, and it showed it, but just a dot. There was a stroke of luck, believe it or not. Ray Smith in Command and Staff College, I think he went to Army Command and Staff, did his thesis on the island of Grenada.
Okay.
And the Cuban Soviet Marxist takeover. So, and there were people later on said it was all planned. They put a battalion commander in that knew, and there was an officer, a Navy officer. We were on the Guam, an old rust bucket, and there was a Navy officer. I think he was a lieutenant or a commander. He was an amateur sailor, and he had actually sailed around Grenada, so he had intimate knowledge of the beaches and the inlets and any place where he thought maybe Amtrak's going. So we lucked out there. Other than that, we had no intel whatsoever. We went in blind. And as you know, we did well, but it was a colossal failure on the special ops. They, and these are good guys. I'm not, it was just facts. SEAL Team 6 haloed a group in with boats and they never saw them again. Comes to find out that they didn't wear
Yeah.
wetsuits and all that, and they got put in the wrong spot. They got dropped away from their boat. The plane malfunctioned, so they probably drowned of hypothermia. And Delta Force was there. Elements of SEAL Team 6 were there. And it was just a nightmare coordination wise. And after Grenada, that's when they decided to get really serious about SOCOM and JSOC because, they had already had the Desert One tragedy, trying to rescue the hostages. And so it was a tragedy. Lives were lost on the special ops front. These are brave guys, obviously. Um, and that led to them really, you would have more experience than me. That led to them developing JSOC into, I think, the most efficient killing machine this earth has ever seen. They're talking about unleashing them on the drug cartels. If I was a drug cartel and they do that, I would run, not
Yeah.
walk, and get the hell away because they're gonna put one right in your forehead. And honestly, I hope they do it. I don't know the technicalities, but you want to get rid of these guys, you put those guys on them, and they will hunt them down to the death, and you know that. So we did Grenada, and but on the before we got to Grenada, maybe on the third day heading south, because it was quite a long trip, because we were on a parallel from Norfolk to the Rock of Gibraltar. We turned right south. About the third day, I go up in the flight deck again. My XO's there, and he comes to me and goes, "Hey, the BLT headquarters got hit with a vehicle bomb this morning,
Right.
and it looks pretty bad. They're predicting there might be as many as a dozen casualties." I'm like, "Wow, wow." Well, then as the hours
Sure.
and days went on, more and more reports were coming in, and the list grew longer. And now I start seeing guys I went to IOC with and other people. I was a drill instructor with them, and other guys. We all recognized people there, gone, dead. And it just grew. And as you knew, it eventually grew to like 241 Marines, sailors. And there were actually a few soldiers there too with the target acquisition battery radar. So there were 3 or 4 soldiers killed there. So Ray Smith, again, very influential. He said, "We're going into, this is not an invasion of Grenada. We are liberating these people. They are going to be happy to see us because these Cubans, under Soviet influence, have treated them like crap." And he was exactly right. So
Right.
he said, "Now is not the time to seek vengeance for our buddies in Beirut. We're going to get a chance to do that. This isn't the time." And I never forgot that, because as you know well, Assad, it's amazing what an 18-year-old Marine with a bayonet can do if he's unrestrained. I mean, they can get every bit as savage as the most savage fighter. And so they need leadership. They need NCO leadership. Say, "Oh, no, no, we don't do that. What are you doing? Get back here. And so Ray Smith was a calming presence, out were our staff NCOs and all of that. So we get off the island and we're heading back to the Med. And I remember we had the Marine Corps birthday on the Guam, and I was so impressed. We're in the officer's wardroom, and the ship's captain, we're there and we're singing the Marine Corps hymn. The ship's captain was singing, and he knew the Marine Corps hymn, and I was duly impressed by that.
Right.
Because being young, we don't have much regret. Like, why would anybody want to be a swabby? Like, why would anybody want to be in the Navy? Why would you settle? I mean, of course, you get older and say, the Navy and the Army actually got a few squared away guys too, But when you're young, it's like, get out of my face, lesser being. So anyway, before I left for Beirut, the battalion commander, the company commander, called me up to the battalion commander's office and said, "Mike, we got a special mission for you and your platoon sergeant in Beirut. You're not going to be at the airport with us. As you know, the embassy got truck bombed in April of this year, and they moved the critical functions down the street to the British embassy, and a couple of, maybe a block away on that street, they called it the Corniche. It was a waterfront, the Mediterranean, beautiful street.
Yeah.
there's a big apartment building that they've rented, and that's where all the other embassies are. So there's a huge compound up there, and there's about 80 Marines up there, a platoon reinforced, and they provide external security for that compound. The MSGs are still in the embassy, but it's a big compound. We're sending you up there with your platoon sergeant, and you're going to have, basically it worked out to be 104 Marines, 3 Amtraks, corpsmen, a couple Air Force bomb dogs. So at one point I had more Marines as a second lieutenant than my captain did at the airport. So I used to good naturedly joke with him. I says, well, you need to send that guy on up here because I am the Fox Company commander. And he would, he would pitch at me, good natured. So that was very, very enlightening. And it wasn't lost on me that there were captains. I heard this. There were captains, S3 Alphas, H&S company commander, staff jobs, thinking, I don't have a company, but this is a dream job. And he gave it to his second lieutenant,
Yeah.
And it's not that they had anything against me. I would have been envious too, like this is a big deal, And so, of course, I knew the weight of the world was on me. And some anecdotal, there was a Army attaché, defense attaché, was a full colonel, good guy, and he was a Lebanese guy. I still remember his name. His name was Colonel Masabni, and he was born in Lebanon, but he was a U.S. Army colonel. He actually, unbeknownst to me, after a week or so, went down to the airport and talked to Ray Smith and General Joy, the VU commander. They made it a 1-star because the other contingents had 1 star. And he said, look, nothing critical, guys. He seems to be a fine kid. He says, second lieutenant, you're really putting a second lieutenant? I mean, that's probably a field grade, your XO or your S3. I mean, that's a heavy job. I didn't know this. And I don't blame him because he was looking at the overall mission. And frankly, his security depended on us. We were going to stop truck bombs from getting into his place. So General Joy said, well, and General Joy and Ray Smith had served together as advisors during the Easter offensive. So there was a connection there. And I love General Joy. I ended up speaking more to him during the Beirut float than my company commander or Ray Smith. And I spoke to Ray Smith more than my company commander. I rarely saw my company commander because he was down at the airport, engaged. And so there was a bystanders to that discussion. And one of them said, I only found this out like a year later. He said, General Joy said, well, I trust the colonel here. And if he's there, that lieutenant stays and we're not replacing him. And Ray Smith said, well, Colonel, I'll be honest with you. We'll replace him if you're saying he's not doing a good job, but we're going to replace him with another lieutenant. I don't have a captain to spare. I need them down here.
Right.
And so the colonel was like, what the hell? And I knew the heat was on. I always knew the heat was on. Like, Mike, you can't screw this up. So it was probably the most pressure-filled job I've ever had in my life. And I got to tell you that when I left, I felt 20 years older. So it was just the weight of it, because so I got there in November, and around January, late January, Reagan pulled all the Marines out at the airport, except my contingent. And instead of Ray Smith saying, well, now we're going to come here, I'm going to be there, they stayed there and they left me there. So I was the senior Marine ashore.
Wow.
And people tell me, Mike, that would never happen today, which I'm sad about. But what I realized back then is that wasn't supposed to happen back then either.
Right.
The trust that he had in me, and he told me later on, and I'll be honest with you, I was feeling good about myself, like, yeah, I got this, And he said, you know why I really picked you? I'm like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, I'm former enlisted, drill instructor, squared away guy. He said, I picked you because you and your platoon sergeant, I felt, were the very strongest
The team.
combination in the battalion. And then I realized if it wasn't for that platoon sergeant, it wouldn't have been me. Because I'll be honest with you, we had 6 or 7 lieutenants, as we say, were shit hot. And either one of them could have done that mission. Any of them could have done that mission as well or better than me. So I just happened, again, to be at the right spot, the right time. And that was a pivotal moment in my career because we managed to pull it off. And that led, we escaped unharmed. I'll never forget we were escaping, I say escaping, we were getting out. The other guys had replaced us. And to show you the mentality back then, they replaced me. 3-8 came in. It was the only show in town, Assad. They replaced me with two lieutenants who had gone to IOC with me, and they were top-notch guys. Either one of them could have done it by themselves. Two lieutenants, two captains,
Oh my God.
a major, and the battalion commander used to fly in every day and PT on the coronation. I think that was his main excuse, but they loaded it up. And so this wasn't supposed to happen even back in that era. So I was truly blessed. Before we left, somehow the chairman of the Joint Chiefs finds out about it. And I actually talked to him on the radio one time. I was in the British Embassy, and the defense attaches were there. Now they were Marines. And they said, "Hey, come here, Lieutenant. This is the chairman, General Vesey, is on the line here." And we're telling him about the contingent. General Vesey, we've got the lieutenant here. He just happened to walk in. You want to talk to him? Yeah, put him on. So they shove a mic in me. I'm like, "Yes, sir, this is Lieutenant Ettore." He goes, "Hey, I heard you're doing a great job. Keep kicking ass, blah, blah, blah." He's all complimentary. He goes, "I really want to know, where are you guys going to invade next? You did Grenada, now you're in Beirut. What next? You tell me, where you guys going next? So I know." And I'm like, "Oh, thank you, General." Well, then after that, no lack of confidence in me, but he went over to PX Kelly, and the heat started like, "PX, Paul, what are you doing?" Paul, sounds like a good guy. Talk to him. And the Marine colonels there said, "He's great. He's doing well. He's handled he's doing well." But it's a second lieutenant, so now the inner service heat is coming down. What are you guys doing? And incredibly, aside from the commandant on down, they had such trust in Ray Smith and General Joy that they stood firm. It was almost like a matter of pride, like, "Well, your lieutenants may not handle it, but ours can." And they dug their heels in and said, "He's staying." And so I stayed for another 7 weeks or something like that. Now, right toward the end, the colonel called me and said, "Mike, the heat is getting unbearable. So I'm going to send your company commander in. Don't change a thing." So the company commander flew in just so they could say, "All right, we finally put a captain there."
Yeah.
And he said, "Mike, you got it." And to be honest with you, what we spent most of our time doing at that point was writing awards. That was a big shock to me. I wasn't much of a writer back then.
Right.
But we were writing awards that captains in the rifle companies, other companies had written. Some of them could write, and some of them aside, it was like, wait a minute, I'm a second lieutenant, a phys ed major. I'm rewriting this guy's award. Captain Dick said, "Mike, it's a pain in the ass. We're doing a lot of awards in addition to ours. The bottom line is this: do you want these deserving Marines to get the award or not?" I said, "Well, of course." He said, "Then pick up a stack and have at it." And so we were rewriting summary of actions and all that. And that was a seminal moment for me. I realized ain't nobody ever going to have to rewrite my stuff. And when I get lieutenants, I am going to make sure they are capable of writing something that the colonel can sign. We are going to be good tactically, but we're going to check that box as well. You got to know how to write at least adequately. And if I can do it as a bonehead phys ed major, you guys can do it too. So I put a lot of heat on a lot of tutoring on my lieutenants. So anyway, we're getting extracted. Half of the contingent's out. The other guys got it, and we start getting mortared. And I'm like, so there's no helos. We're hunkered down. I'm like, these guys are never going to let me get out of here, So it stopped. We flew out, and I remember Beirut, looking out the back end of it, and Beirut was getting smaller, and I'm like, oh Jesus, it's great. And it wasn't until I got to Rota, I got on the ship, went to sleep, got to Rota a few days later to do remember we used to wash all the equipment, all the gear, so you didn't get the snails. The FDA used to put inspectors to the wash down, they used to call it. It was mostly an enlisted run show. Big wash racks spraying the mud off of the vehicles. We did it at every med float. And so this is the first time all the ships are pulling in the road. It's the first time that I have seen my buddies since the end of Grenada. And sometimes since before we left, because some of the lieutenants I never saw. We were on different ships. And so I roll off the deck and I see some of my buddies I hadn't seen, fellow lieutenants. And one of them was in the S4 and the other one was the adjutant. Because I'm with my buddies. I'm like, hey, how you doing, fellas? We're getting ready to go to the O Club and
Right.
put one on. And it was very embarrassing to me. All my peers are there. There's like 15 lieutenants. And the adjutant said, hey, Ettore, Bronze Star. And I'm like, what? What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
This Colonel put you in for a Bronze Star. I saw the paperwork. I had to process it. He goes, and I'm like, what? Really? And he said, yeah. And I'm like, it was embarrassing to me. I'm like, come on.
Right.
And so I didn't say anything. I just figured, well, he's Ray Smith. And if he says that I meet the criteria, who am I to argue? But it was just, I can't really describe it. It was humbling and surreal to me at the same time. And so it did go through. And I got to tell you, that was the start of some troubles, because when I got that award, Ray Smith told me, Mike, you deserve it, but you're about to meet a whole lot of people that are going to hate you for what you're going to wear on your chest. And he goes, trust me, I have lived that. I was a captain with a Navy Cross. I was a lieutenant, a second lieutenant, picked up a rifle company in Hawaii City with a Bronze Star. And he said, believe it or not, there are people that are going to look at you. They don't have ribbons. They weren't in the right spot. And there's going to be a lot of envy. A lot of people are going to be very congratulatory to you. They're going to, most of it, you're going to meet. And boy, he was right, Assad. He was friggin' right. And so, I'm jumping forward and all that, but, I lived my entire career after that. And then, right spot, right time, Desert Storm, so another one, Grenada, and then, oh, God, heavens forbid, Leftwhich Trophy, which is so humbled. When I looked at the list of runners up, which I believe you were one year, you know what I mean? Every one of those guys I'm looking. And so when I got the award at TBS, I was on the staff and just got there. They fell out the whole school, lieutenants
Big
there.
deal.
They made a big deal. John Ramundi came. Remember, there was the big statue of the Leftwich there, the big fool. So he's there and turns it over to me. It's you. And I said, look, lieutenants, I just want to make something clear. I am so proud to receive this thing, but I got to be honest with you. Right now, I can name off the top of my head 30 or 40 captains that if their name came out in that message and said they're the Leftwhich Trophy recipient for this year, I would have looked and said, awesome. That guy represents everything that award is supposed to be. I said, so make no delusions. I am not the best captain in the Marine Corps. Far from it. I wanted to teach them that lesson because, at that age, they're just idol worship.
Right.
But that increased the pressure. And did I meet guys throughout my career I met guys that hated me before they knew me, and I also met more than a handful that, meet them, served at TBS and stuff like that. If it happened once, Assad, it happened 8 or 9 times, friends with the guy. And after about several months or a year, he goes, Mike, can I talk to you about, I really need to level with you on something. I'm like, sure. He goes, when I got here, first of all, I don't know if you know that guy's got a problem with you. And I did. I knew this guy had a little bit of issue. He was and jealous of me, insecure. And he said, when I got here, he told me, hey, there's a guy here named Ettore, hacked with ribbons and medals, Leftwhich Trophy. He's very arrogant, condescending, and he'll screw you. Watch out, And he said, Mike, that's what I was cautioned. And he said, and I'm embarrassed to say this, Mike, I listened to him. I watched no loftiness or arrogance or anything like that. And of course, that made me feel good because back then, Assad, as you know, right spot, right time. That was a heavy resume back then, but it really was right spot, right time. Now, did I have to perform? Yes, but were there legions of other guys that could have performed as well or better? Absolutely. I was under no illusions that I was the guy, so to speak.
Yeah.
Never thought that. So, I knew the pressure of doing that. And be honest with you, I put a post up every Memorial Day on LinkedIn. It's got a picture of Colonel Leftwhich and then a picture of my home office. I had a custom made bookcase for it. And that trophy is solid bronze. It weighs 45 pounds. It's made by the same guy that carved the Iwo Jima monument, the famous Iwo Jima. Ross Perot, the famous Ross Perot was Leftwich's Naval Academy roommate. And he sponsored that award anonymously. And he funded the first 20 of them. And he managed to find the guy, Felix de Weldon, the sculptor, who was close to 80 years old, and managed to talk him out of retirement to sculpt the original. And if you look at the Leftwhich Trophy and the Iwo Jima, you could tell the same guy did it. The same strokes in the bronze and all the same kind of features. And so it is a collector's item that, of course, will never be sold. It's a family heirloom and all that. Just privileged to have it. But I got to tell you, that 45 pounds, at times it weighed 4 tons. And I still strive to live up to that legacy. And so I hope to the audience, I know I'm going on at length about this. I really don't consider myself anything special. I think I was a real, you greatly exceeded me in rank and
Uh-huh.
all of that. My claim to fame was I think I was a really good sergeant, and I think I was a pretty good company commander. And that's where I topped out. Anything else about what was in my future is pure speculation at best. And as far as being a general officer, any military branch that would make me a general officer is not worthy of me being it. I'm going to retire because the standards are so low. That's my thought, my story.
Yeah.
So, so that's really it. I left 1-8, went to Desert Storm, did Desert Storm with them again. Probably the strongest contingent of officers and enlisted in my company I'd ever seen assembled in one spot. Unbelievable. I had Bruce Gumbar as the battalion CO. Unbelievable. I know we talked about him before. Just a stud in every way. Learned a lot from him. Great combat leader. And the XO was a guy named Chris Wilk, who did a
Yep.
great job as well. They both retired as full colonels and probably could have done more, but you know how it is. Not everybody, gets up there and all that. And so we did Desert Storm and came back, and then we deployed right back right away to do contingency operations. So we were right back to the Gulf. I pick up a rifle company and talk about Semper Gumby being flexible. We got back and we were deploying 3 months later. MUSOC. So we got to go through the evaluations. So the first time I ever took my Marines to the field as a rifle company commander was a graded MUSOC event, a graded event. So the evaluator came back and he said, well, I'll be honest with you, the dispersion sucked and this and that. And I'm like, and he said this in front of everybody. I'm like, Captain, I believe you. And I said, I absolutely believe you. I saw it too. And I said, the only thing I can say in my defense is you have as much time in the field with this company as I do. That was the first time we ever went to the field. He's like, what? So we just had to make it happen. And we
Yeah.
got through it. We had a colonel named Wheeler Baker. I don't know if you ever met him. Great guy, Vietnam vet, enlisted, had a PhD in decision making. And this guy was good. As you know, it's always good when the boss knows more than you.
Right.
And this guy knew, he was the mule, and this guy knew more than all of us. He was great, great leader, great mentor, could outrun us all. He was a PT stud, recon guy, Royal Marine Commando, exchange tour and all that. Can't say enough good about the guy. So another blessed tour with 1-8, and then I went to TBS. I had a kind of a feeling, to be honest with you, the thought of doing something else, I'm like, I've attended all wars possible. Nothing's going to happen.
Right.
Go to TBS. Go to TBS and dump all this knowledge out. I love being near young officers. Go to TBS. So I went there knowing this is probably it for me. I didn't tell anybody. And we'll set this up for later, but it'll set us up for later because I know you want to talk about it. When I got to TBS, I just loved it. For some reason, though, TBS had fallen into disrepute among the monitors, and I was advised not to go to TBS
Right.
by well-meaning people. Hey, Mike, don't go there. It's a dumping ground. What? Why? TBS, a dumping ground? Yeah. In fact, no captain that's been eligible for major at TBS has made it for the last 2 or 3 years. I'm like, what? Well, who are they assigning there? I said, well, you know what? I'm going. I my fit reps are in. I'm either going to be or not be a major based upon what I've already done. I'm up for the next board, unless I go up there and do something egregious. It is what it is. I'm going, because I knew all this World War II, Korea, Vietnam knowledge that these guys, I want to go back and bleed some of it away. I want to leave that legacy. Let the young guys have this to the extent that I can. So I got up there, and Colonel Fawcett was there, great guy. And he started turning it around, demanding more of the monitor. So next thing you know, boom, Dennis Green shows up. Dennis Green shows up, Leftwhich recipient in 1991. And I'd not received the award yet. And Dennis and I are from the same hometown. I'm like, Dennis. So next thing you know, we get a bunch of new guys, lieutenants like Randy Newman, Roger Turner, Jimmy Christmas, Dave Furness, these guys, some of these guys reported to me. And Dennis and I used to look out there. They called it the IG back then, the instructor group. We used to look out there and like, Dennis, are you seeing what I'm seeing? He goes, yes. I'm saying, I'm just happy we don't have to compete with these guys. Look at them. These lieutenants and captains were unbelievable, So I loved it. I just loved it. Dennis was in charge of the offense section. I was in charge of the defense. And then I had 2 warrant officer companies. Nobody wanted the warrant officer company because they were afraid they were hard to handle. And I told Colonel Conway at the time, I'll do it. I love these guys. I'll do it. And I loved it so much and had those guys so well. They were in the groove, because I think they could relate to me. Halfway
Sure.
through the first one, I was at the Hawk on a Friday, and I said, Colonel, I love this. I said, I don't want to jump the gun or be presumptuous, but I'll do this next year if you want me to. And he looked right at me and he said, no reason to mess with success, Mike. And I'm saying this is another lesson for the young guys. Back then, having a regular TBS company, Alpha Company Bravo, the lieutenants, was considered more prestigious than the warrant officer company. Well, it's instead of 6 months long, it's only 3 months long. It's not the same. Among druthers, most people would say, and I still have a little napkin. I went up to the snack bar and made a little column and said, what's best for you career-wise? What's best for the Marine Corps? Best for me career-wise was a regular company. What's best for the Marine Corps? Mike, you're one of the few guys up here uniquely qualified to get a grip on these guys and make it a really good experience for them. Because the previous 2 or 3 classes, Assad, they went wild on the staff. They were hard to handle. They were arguing, bitching. And I saw the first class. I wasn't in charge of that. And I'm like, and these guys were sergeants and staff sergeants 2 weeks ago. Now they're W1s, and they don't listen to anybody. In fact, I was watching one of my instructors teach a class one time, and they were hard-assing this kid. And I was observing, and I said, stop. I went up front, and I said, hey, what the hell you guys doing? And I just jacked them up. And some of them I knew. And they came to me later and said, thank you for saying that. We needed that. I don't know what, they just got out of control. Now, I'm making a broad statement because my warrant officers were great. I'm still in touch with them a lot of times, and we had fun. I just loved those guys. I loved them. And I had some experience because when I was at Parris Island as a series officer, same thing, I did a few series, wanted to be a company commander, but the colonel said, no, Mike, you got this other guy here. He's got more experience than you. He's got more series. I said, all right, well, how about the drill instructor series? Does that count for anything? He goes, no, you'll get your time. You want to make me the S4? I'm like, ah. And so the colonel from Weapons Battalion ran into me in a PX, and he was getting ready to turn that around because that had been a dumping ground for officers. He said, hey, you interested? I'm like, I'm interested. Same thing. Mike, what are you doing? Weapons. That's where we send the guys that can't hack it on the street. What are you doing? I said, I'm not that guy. They weren't looking good. Their uniforms are crap, generally speaking. And I said, that's going to change. And so I went out there and inherited range company, all the PMIs and coaches. And there were 4 or 5 warrant officers there, range officers, all very good. But they had been demoralized because they kept getting herd captains out there.
Right.
And so they just, they just were demoralized. The morale was low and they got no support whatsoever. These guys had all been drill instructors. They were my kind of Marines. And so I got in there and started firing them up a little bit. And then they were off to the races. And those guys turned that whole place into a place where everybody wanted to go now. When I got to keep that company aside 2 years at Paris Island, which was very odd. Because we usually keep it a year and then you go do a staff job. There was a change of command at the 1 year point, and a new colonel said, no, you're staying. I've heard about your staying, so I got blessed again. 2 years as a company commander, learned how to deal with a first sergeant, learned how to deal with officers that were stronger than me, and so that taught me how to delegate and trust and supervise, but trust and all that. So another blessed experience, by taking a job that everybody told me don't take, And so roll forward to TBS, the same thing. And then it happened. I loved it on the staff, but very quickly, Bill Clinton got elected.
Mm-hmm.
And everything changed. Everything changed, and it set the stage for what has happened since then. All of a sudden, the politicians, there was a infamous congresswoman there, I think from South Dakota or something, named Pat Schroeder.
Yep.
And she was a bona fide feminist. We used to call her feminazis because it was like they weren't looking for women equality. They were looking for women's superiority. So there's all sorts of heat coming on the generals and all that. And so all of a sudden they declared that women are the physical equals of men, which I'll never agree to, And I saw them start methodically whitewashing standards. And it really bothered me. Now, to his credit, Colonel Fawcett left probably before that. Colonel Conway stood firm. I mean, he was fighting it the whole way and all that, but it was the generals in charge of him. And basically they were saying, well, we're not asking you to apply a double standard, but you got to be a little bit understanding and all that. And we weren't having that at all. So I realized then, Assad, my first real exposure to generals, and especially generals under political pressure, because they all wanted to be the commandant and all that. And I realized, I'm making the sweeping indictment of the guys that I observed. I realized one day I woke up and I said to myself while watching, my God, they're going to lie. They're willing to lie, right, even at the expense of maybe somebody getting hurt or in combat. They're going to lie rather than stand tall, right, and say, I can't support that. If it's a lawful order, I can't do it in good conscience, and I'm putting in my papers to retire. You're going to have to get another general to execute that.
Right.
I don't know why they do that. We'll talk about it later, but I knew right then and there, this ain't going well, Mike. You don't have it in you to do this. And so Conway, to his credit, I would go on stage and lieutenants would say, this is for Captain Ettore, Major Ettore. What do you think about women integration and combat arms? I said, totally against it. I said, now, don't get me wrong, ladies out there. There's a place for women in the Marine Corps. And women are tough and they can be brave under fire. That's been proven. But sustained combat operations under heavy loads, heat and cold, your body will break down. And I would ask them, don't raise your hands, but how many of you ladies out there right now graduated OCS with pelvic stress fractures and were in my company for 8 months or a year, and you still have injuries because we insisted on treating you like men at OCS because it's the same curriculum, the same thing, and you're breaking down. And they're 22-year-old women and all that. And I stay in contact. I'm still in contact. And some of them said, you're absolutely right, Mike. I have back injuries to this day. because they insisted I was a man. And I tried my best, but I weighed 120, Mike, and I got a pack that's 80 pounds, and I'm running and all that. So I know I'm all over the page on this, Assad, but
No, this is good.
long story made short, the staff really got boosted, a lot of great guys. But aside from Conway and Dennis Green, I don't know if there was anybody up there willing to stand on stage. Captain, what do you think about this? I would say, hey, listen, and Conway would be in the back of the room, just a
Mhm.
colonel. And I knew he was going to be the commandant. And a lot of guys would have looked at me, oh, Mike's a good guy, but he's a threat. I got to ship him out of here. He could ruin my career just by saying something. Because guys were getting relieved back then. They
Right.
were absolutely getting relieved for doing something. Um, at the same time, I don't know if you ever knew a guy named Nick Pratt.
Sure. Yeah.
Nick Pratt, as you know, was seconded to the CIA. He was the guy that brought the Stinger missiles to the Afghan rebels, to help the Soviets, kick the Soviets' asses and all that. Nick Pratt was going places. Surely was going to be a general, great looking guy, and a great guy, a great leader. He brought in General Barrow, our commandant, World War II, Korea, Navy Cross, all this, Dewey Canyon. And he brought him in, and they asked General Barrow, what do you think about this? And Barrow was oh no. There's a YouTube video of him out in front of Congress saying don't do it. War is about killing, blah, blah, blah. Don't do it. Don't put American women in. And a couple of female officers in the commander staff class became so incensed by that, they reported it up the chain of command to the IG and said, this guy said this, we don't care who he is. And the colonel invited him in, and he was standing there nodding his head. And they relieved Nick Pratt for that. They relieved the CO of Command and Staff College for that. At the same time, that was the climate. It was a climate of fear. Shut up and comply. Take the estrogen shot, as I called it, or you are a marked man forever. And Assad, I am not claiming to be a hero, but I refuse to take the shot. I refuse to, I had the unfortunate experience, as have you, I'm sure, of seeing a Marine laying under a poncho dead. And I knew if I stayed in, I was going to probably do that, maybe go to combat again. And I had to be able to look at those parents and say, hey, look, I'm so sorry. It was just his time. We were the best we could possibly, great training. Everybody was there, great leaders. And I knew that compromises were being made. I wasn't going to be able to say that then, and especially in the future. So I decided, you got to go, Mike. You got to go. It's time for you to go, because where this is going, you can't support. And you're going to be asked to stand in front of Marines someday and say, yesterday that was bad, today it's good. And so Dennis and I, two Leftwhich Trophy guys with bright futures, we put on. Dennis was the IOC group chief,
Right.
and I'm at command and staff. And I'm like, Dennis, and he's got orders. I said, don't do it, Dennis. The school wasn't all that good back then. And I said, you know what, Dennis, I've decided I'm going to retire. And so Dennis and I talked long and hard. So he put his papers in too. So within the span of 90 days, you got two of us putting the papers in. So we're getting talked to by generals. And I appreciate that. Was flattering, that don't do it. Colonels, don't do it, Mike. Stay around. You got to, for your future. And a general that will go unnamed called me in. And he said, and I wasn't a fan of this guy, but he was a general, a multi-star general at that. And he said, Mike, why are you doing this? You're going to get all the good jobs, Mike. Wait, And I said, oh, I told you this before. I said, General, I'm not doing this because I'm afraid I won't be a battalion commander or a regimental or MU commander. I said, with barring a bad accident, unfortunate accident, live fire, kid gets killed or something, I'm going to get those jobs. I expect that I'm going to get those jobs. If it's a 10% cut, when have I ever not been in a 10%? Very confident statement some would view as arrogant. I said, I'm not retiring because I'm afraid I'm not going to get those jobs. I'm afraid that I'm going to get them and I'm going to be required to support, say, and promote things that I cannot. And I see where it's going. And here, Assad, is where it might get a little bit contentious. And I have a caveat with saying whatever I'm about to say, I had no problem with any of these populations in the business world.
Right.
Women flourished under me.
Sure.
Alternative lifestylers flourished under me. I had a man that was a young kid and he was a national champion drag queen. And I went down and said, "Hey, I heard you kicked ass this week." Shook his hand, no problem.
Yeah.
Now, in the military, I just thought it was not conducive to good spirit and discipline. That was just Mike Ettore's opinion and the opinion of most of us back then. So I told this general, we're going to have women forced into being grunts. And we're going to tell them everything is great, but the standards are going to, nothing's changed. It all changed, sir. TBS has already changed. Everything has changed. Look at the Naval Academy plebe summer pre-1976, and then a few years after that, because everybody says the same thing. Assad, nothing's going to change. Same standard. By God, and if they can meet the standard. And that was a big deal. I don't think maybe you had to do it, but later on it got really hard, like a selection, almost like an SAS selection hump where machine guns and, all this weight and all that. And they had to hustle for this. And it became a tradition. And all of a sudden it was decided, maybe we should, what really are we getting from the men doing this? So they started watering it down, but the standards are the same. They're meeting the standards. And I do acknowledge you have that occasional studette.
Mm-hmm.
She's stronger than most men. She could hang, but there's not many of them. They're just not. And so I told this guy, we're going to cram women and we're going to reduce the standards. I already see them doing it in flight school. And, you remember the famous stories where they rushed some people through flight school.
Yes.
And they get out there and they had horrific crashes. And they looked at the records and said, even today, if this was a man, they wouldn't have graduated flight school, but the Congress must be satisfied. So they essentially sent that shaky pilot out there and she pickled it, hit the side of the aircraft carrier. And I don't demean her at all. Very brand new pilot, but had problems, And of course, the big cover up happened over that. I had some good inside info on that. Because we're going to have men married to men. We're going to have men wearing dresses. We're going to have all sorts of funky stuff going on. And he looked at me and laughed. And he said, "Mike, none of that's going to happen." And I hate to be right, Assad. All of it has happened in spades. And I knew that I couldn't do it. I'm not trying to be on the moral high ground. But when you see these general officers, we may get to it here or in another episode or something, about standing up and being willing to throw your stars down, it's really not that hard, Assad, to vote with your conscience. You got your character, you got your red lines, your morals that you won't compromise. And if they ask you to do it, you don't do it. I can't do that. I respectfully want to resign or submit my retirement and all that. And I've never regretted that at all. So I've talked to some generals and said, "Well, Mike, it's not that easy, I'm like, "Sure it is." I said, I retired with a major's pension. Now, it all worked out for me in the corporate world, but that was not guaranteed at all. My dad didn't have a business. I went out there and, again, things fell into place, so I did super well. But I was like, I'm going to retire as a major with a major's pension. I'm a pretty good Marine. I'll at least be an adequate civilian. I'll feed my family,
Right.
And of course, I'd like to think I greatly exceeded that. But I said, I got to believe you can struggle along on a major general's pension. But something happens to him, as you know. Now I'm really philosophizing.
No, you're
I think
right on
what
the money.
happened, I think Assad is, and there were some really fine generals there, but I think they're surprised to make it. We only Marine Corps make 8 or 10 a year, brigadier generals. And I think most of them are like, I can't believe I made it. We know that old saying about familiarity breeds contempt. Well, now they start getting in a room with all generals, symposiums and all that. And I think familiarity starts breeding ambition. because I think they're sitting there as 1 stars, some of them, if not most of them. And they're like, I'm looking at old Harry, he's a 2 star, and Joe is a 3 star. And quite frankly, now that I'm here in the room, there ain't nothing these guys got that I don't have. And then they begin, I think, in some cases, selling their soul. Their ego is such that they've got to get that next button, so to speak. And my
Absolutely.
theory is, and it's always been that way to some degree, but I think it's gone on steroids, mid 90s and forward. And if you're asking me, I'm really straying here. If you're asking me that we have in the Marine Corps for the last 20, 25 years or so, general officers that have made decisions that were best for their career and post Marine Corps career. Generals never had post Marine Corps. Now they do. Now they can work in our 15, 20 years. They're fairly healthy and all that. I think it clouds their decision making and their ability or willingness to speak up. And I've had a general officer say, Mike, I think you're right. And I think I've done it to some extent. And he said, we start talking about second careers. If we don't champion, if we oppose these politically correct things that are being done, what some would call wokeism or whatever, quotas or, that's going to be unpopular with some people. If we do anything but enthusively embrace it, we are dead in the water for corporate boards or being hired because the reputation will go out. That guy right there doesn't get it. And our shareholders won't tolerate a guy like that. And he was in the Marine Corps and he was avowed, he didn't agree with gays and lesbians in the Marine Corps and all that. And he said, I'll be honest with you, I do think that we are at a period where we all know that. And I do think people are making a lot of decisions, tactical and strategic decisions, warfighting decisions that don't have the best interest of the snuffy on the ground at heart.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you would know better than me, Assad. I watched the whole Afghan and Iraq unfold and all that. And in the corporate world, this as a publicly traded senior executive, making big money and all that. If it ever found out that we were involved in a fraud or even just mistaken misreporting of financials 2 years ago, 3 years ago, then they have what's called a clawback and say, now that we've adjusted the numbers, Ettore, you don't get that 7-figure bonus. You really rated 200 grand.
Right.
And so you got to come up with 900 grand right now.
Right.
It's called a clawback. And I got to be honest with you, if I had my way, general officers would be held to the same scrutiny as publicly traded executives who have responsibilities, but far less daunting than the stakes the generals are in charge of. And I think you'll support the gist of this. I think Iraq and Afghanistan should be looked at with high scrutiny. I think there were many fine generals there, but I think there was a whole lot of sitting on their hands. I've not met an Afghan vet yet that didn't tell me as early as 2003, 2004, 2005, Mike, these are different people than us. They're certainly never going to embrace our level of democracy and things like that. You're telling, this guy won the election. He's from a different tribe. He's going to be in charge of your valley now. Not going to happen. And Mike, I got to be honest with you, despite what all these guys are saying, the Afghan army will never be able to fight on its own and defend their country. It's just not going to happen. Yet all you heard as a participant it's great. They're blah, blah, blah. So I'm no fan of President Biden. I actually think he believed what his generals are telling him. Sir, they're going to fight. And they folded in less than 2 weeks. And I honestly think he believed his generals because nobody wanted to to tell the emperor, I don't know what these other generals said, sir, but we're not seeing it here.
Right.
These guys are inept. They're not going to fight. There's cultural, there's very, now, you know better than me, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, from what I talked, I have a good network. I talk to people. There were some shit hot units. There were like some special ops units and things like that, no, these Afghans would fight. And they're still fighting over there. They moved up north, So I'm not making a broad statement. I'm making a general observation as a non-participant based upon input from participants and all that. So I know I got off on a tangent right there,
Oh no,
but I will say this, and we knew we were going to talk about this. We got a lot of guys with big names. Mad Dog Mattis. Who's the other guy that's write books now? He just wrote one on character. The guy that wrote a false Silver Star citation, McChrystal.
Right.
I don't begrudge these guys making good money out there. But Assad, you don't know this, but I do. Now, you sat in some of these, but starting as early as a young sergeant, we would sit in PMEs, and the Vietnam guys would give PMEs and say, here's what we blew in Vietnam. Aside from not taking the local populace into concern, we were just arrogant, blah, blah, blah. We never had an end state. We never said in Vietnam, when A, B, and C happens, we are done. We're turning it over to the South Vietnamese army. We just kept doing one mission after another. And talk about moral fiber. McNamara wrote a book, and he said in 1966, he knew the ground war was unwinnable. At that point, I think we had 15,000 casualties, 15,000 dead. Why didn't you say something? Well, I didn't think it was my place. I had to support the president. So another 37,000 get killed. Yeah. And so he said, and there's an anecdote that most people don't know about resignation. I long story made short, well, we don't have a history of general officers resigning. I think we should. So there was an Army chief of staff in Vietnam, late 60s, named Harold K. Johnson. It's a factual story. He realized that the Vietnam War was so wrong and that we were sending these young boys to their deaths. He decided he was going to drive to the White House, request an audience with the president, and say, I cannot no longer support this war. He's a member of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, I can't do it. And I'm going to retire. I can't do this in good conscience. And he had his driver drive him. They let him into the White House. He gets to wherever they're going to walk in the door. He gets out of the car and he vomits. And he gets back in the car. Doesn't do it. Gets back in the car and goes back to his office. And this is a direct quote that I want all your young guys to hear. He wrote later on, he said, I will go, direct quote, I've said it many times, I will go to my grave knowing that I had a lapse of moral courage at the very time my soldiers needed me. I got to tell you, I thank him for being honest, but I'd rather be dead than have to honestly say that about myself. And I know you would too, and I think most people do. He just couldn't do it. And you know what? If you had the Army Chief of Staff resigning in protest legally, like, hey, this is no mutiny, I can't do it, get another guy. If we would have that, I think the politicians would be a little bit more wary about inflicting stuff. To my point, I'm not sure you're aware of this, but I heard this from General Mundy himself. We had a private conversation. When Bill Clinton got elected, he was wildly unpopular, draft dodger and all of that, Scandalous that he got elected. Nobody thought he had a chance. He got him. And then he promised on the campaign trail, I will legalize gays, gays and lesbians with the stroke of a pen. So he gets in and he's about to do it. General Mundy goes to his office, and this is a fact. He goes to his office and says, President Clinton, we are not staging a mutiny, but I have to tell you, if you do that, I cannot support that. And I will resign. Obviously, got enough time. I will be gone. And I'm here to tell you, I forget what the number was now. I have 28 other Marine Corps generals that have told me to relay to you, they will go too. And as best I know, the Marine Corps was the only one that did that. And Bill Clinton realized, I'm a draft dodger. I need these guys. I can't have, in the early days of my tenure, all the Marine Corps, the nation loves Marines. And when these guys go, they're going to say, what are they? Maybe you're wrong with this. And that's what he relented. And that's when don't ask, don't tell. That was the compromise came. Don't ask, don't tell. And, Assad, I'll say this for those out there that think I'm an old dinosaur, which I guess I am. Did I serve with gays and lesbian in the Marine Corps? I am absolutely sure. I'm sure you did too. You looked at the guy like, I don't know about that guy, but he's a good Marine and he's not doing anything wrong. And so they were always there, but they kept a low profile. And I agree that, well, they can't live and be themselves and all that. I agree. I hate to be a tormented soul like that. Again, I never had a problem with it in the business world, the civilian world, but in the military, there's no way you can convince me that this hasn't happened. That I think there was a point in time where basically the Marine Corps said, we got our orders, shut up and execute. And if you don't, you're out of here. Right. And what that has resulted in the Marine Corps, and I've had general officers affirm this, you have a lot of Marines, colonels, maybe BGs and below, that have grown up in the Marine Corps that you don't dissent about anything. So the example I'll give you, I talked to a Marine lieutenant general who I knew as a lieutenant. He was one of my lieutenants one time. I won't say his name, and I'll just say he retired within the last 8 years. There's a bunch of them. When we were serving together at TBS, he was a first lieutenant, and General Krulak was in charge of the Acidic, and he came out. All the staff was in the TBS theater. You remember what that is? He came in and said, look, we got some powerful issues going on right now, and a lot of politics, and they're holding the Osprey hostage and stuff like that. And I'm not asking you guys to do double standards, but I just, if you would, and you would just, take care of them and, look out for them, the Marines. And he was, so another first lieutenant stands up, 3-star general, first lieutenant. Sir, Lieutenant Smuckatelli, sir, it sounds to me that's exactly what you're asking us to do. You're asking us to do an informal double standard to graduate these women and not see what we see and tell everybody what everybody above us is saying. It works great. They're great. We should have been doing this years ago.
Right.
And then another first lieutenant stood up and pressed him even harder. Now, I'll say this. So 2 lieutenants pressing a 3-star general, and I mean pressing him hard. Right. And I'm sitting there like, proud of you, fellas. Proud of you, because we pretty much all felt that way. And to his credit, General Krulak absorbed it and said, no, that's not what I'm asking you. Here's, and he absorbed it. He tolerated it because back then it was really what they advertised. We want opposing opinions. Right. You got to do it tactfully and you got to do it professionally. But when the final decision's made, you either execute or you resign. There'll be no mutinies. There'll be no slow rolling of this stuff, no subterfuge. And General Krulak took it. But he left the stage after a while, and I know for a fact he told somebody pretty high ranking, he said, I still think about that day. I was completely off my game. I wasn't well prepared, and I don't blame them for saying that, but I wasn't on my game, and essentially they kicked my ass that day. You know what I mean? He just walked off the stage and basically stopped trying. And so I applaud General Krulak for doing that. Now, here's the punchline of this. I was talking to that 3-star early about the force design thing that had just been made in a cloistered environment and thrust upon the Marine Corps. As you know, despite their denials, General Berger did not unveil a concept to discuss. He unveiled a decision. Here's the decision. We're going to support it. This is the way it's going to be. And I asked him, didn't anybody push back? He said, push back? Like, I was a division commander and I didn't know what was happening. And when I called one of the 2 or 3 general officers that was involved up there, he said, I'm sorry, Smuckatelli, I can't tell you. I can't tell you because I signed a non-disclosure. I can't tell you what's going on up here. So I have talked to 2 serving division commanders when it was rolled out, a MEF commander, and is it a MAG, the equivalent of the division, the air wing MAG?
Uh, Group, yeah,
What am I,
regiment.
group, Yes, exactly. And all of them said, didn't know anything about it. One division commander said, when I learned about force design? When it came out in the Marine Corps Times. And so I asked this 3-star, is there no fight? And he said, I'll be honest with you, Mike, it's a different environment now. And you were absolutely right. When all these unpopular things came in that we had to implement, Marines rightfully started bitching and dissenting. And I think the leadership just said, there's no reasoning with these guys. Shut up and column.
Right.
And that permeated through the ranks. And I said, but you're the 3-star now. You would tolerate, you would be in general's crew, you would welcome that. He goes, absolutely. He said, Mike, that'll never happen in today's Marine Corps. And it won't happen. It hasn't happened for probably at least 20 or 25 years. So you've got a generation of Marines that once they're told to shut up and color, no matter how bad or dangerous or harmful the decisions made. And of course, something that's close to your heart, General McKenzie,
Yeah.
General McKenzie, we'll get into the repeating the sins of Vietnam. General McKenzie, I saw him on, I don't know, CNN or something. What went wrong? Well, we did this and that, and then he, with a smirk on his face, he said, well, I guess we just didn't do a good job of keeping the political and military goals aligned. And I almost fell off my chair. And I'm like, I guess we didn't. You're the sink. You're a 4-star general. And going back to these PMEs, I'm starting to spit now at my screen, Assad. Going back to these PMEs that I sat through the 70s and 80s and 90s. And Mattis and all these guys sat through them too. We'll never do that again in Vietnam. We will do an end state. Here's what we got to do, A, B, C, and we're out of there. We're exit strategy. And I'm going to use the Gulf War as an example. And fellas out there, I am not equating the combat intensity of the Gulf War for the ground troops, Marines anyway, with Fallujah or anything like that.
Right.
It was a 3 or 4 day cakewalk largely. A couple guys got killed, but it wasn't intense combat for the most part. But I will say this. You could ask every single Marine in my company, because I gave them a PME in the desert. The famous thing in Vietnam, or why are you here, son? I don't know, because I got drafted. I don't know. What are we trying to do in Vietnam? I don't know. You could ask any one of my Marines, and I dare say pretty much most Marines in theater, why are we here? What's our mission? So our mission, we're part of a 52-country coalition, and our mission is to expel the Iraqis from Kuwait and restore Kuwaiti sovereignty. Is that it? That's it. What happens if we do that? We're going home, sir. And so Schwarzkopf and all them, Colin Powell, they were Vietnam guys. They lived through the no mission statement, mission creed. Kids are getting killed. We're doing this, blah, blah, blah. And so they insisted on it. The Powell dropped, mission statement. So the Gulf War, I don't think really can serve as a model for intensity of combat, but it can absolutely serve as a model for not repeating the sins of Vietnam if one of the major ones was not defining an end state, an exit strategy. You got to do A, B, and C, we're out of here. That's victory. Instead, we've had 15 years plus of generals. Now, there was something in the beginning, and then they started, well, now we're nation building, and now we're doing this and infrastructure and all that. And I spoke to Marine regimental commanders and battalion commanders, Assad, on the ground having to come back. What was your mission? I got no mission, Mike. I got assigned a sector. And so I was very aggressive. We were already outside our wire. I was outside the wire. The guy next to me was from another regiment, and their mission was minimize casualties. So you got us kicking ass. We're out there. All the enemy realized, just go over here. Those guys are rarely out. They're not going to do it. I'm like, so there was no, here's your mission, which rolls up to a higher mission, which rolls up to this. And in general, we're in Afghanistan to help the politicians achieve these goals in our national interests, military support of political goals and support. Battalion commanders, regimental commanders saying, no, in a battalion commander, don't get me wrong, my regimental commander gave me a mission, but he really didn't get much from the division commander or the guy that's in charge and all. They're just, they repeated the sin. And I will never forgive them for that. I just will never forgive them for that, because you know as well as I do is Eisenhower is smart with this industrial military complex. For professionals, especially the general officer level, war can very much be an opportunity.
Sure.
Wartime general, wartime this, wartime that. And so business is good. And if you're asking me if Mike Ettore thinks that decisions were made, like, yeah, I know this is screwed up. There was no mission statement. All these Afghans aren't going to fight, and we made mistakes and all that. But you know what? I'm not going to say anything because it would be futile, and it would be the end of my career. So they just shut up and they were complicit.
Yes.
And now this is a very loose analogy. The Nuremberg trials, what did the Nazis try to say? I was just following orders. And Mackenzie has said that. Now, I'm not equating anybody to Nazis or horrific, but my point is, Mackenzie has said repeatedly, at the end of the day, I had my orders. And I'm like, well, you had your orders, General, but they didn't have a gun to your head. You could have voted your conscience. And by the way, you were already a 4-star. Were you hoping to be a 5-star? I mean, come on. So I'm not really picking on Mackenzie. It's making a broad statement of where were you guys when the troops needed you? And you know better than me how many deaths, woundings, maimings, and all of that. And the guys really on the ground knew. I know every Afghan and Iraq vet I've met are very proud of their service. And don't get me wrong, those guys listening to this, the troops fought hard, magnificently. Those guys in Fallujah, I admire them. I wonder if I could have done that. I measure myself by them, and I'm not sure I could have done it. You know what I mean? It's all speculation. But I think those guys fought, they were every bit as good as the guys in Iwo Jima or Saipan or Guadalcanal or Belleau Wood. They can fight, and they did. So they're rightfully proud. And they all say, no, I think we're in my sect. We made a difference. We let these women go to school, and we shot a lot of bad guys, really bad guys, and the villagers helped us and all of that. But they all say, in hindsight, in the bigger picture, what were we there for? What resulted? And so when you have Milley saying, well, the Afghan exit, it was a tactical failure, but a logistical success. That's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs aside. And we're rationalizing it to that point. And I had a discussion with an Army Command and Staff, retired colonel, instructor on Army Command and Staff, college, faculty. And I said, yeah, but Joe, whatever his name was, Joe, we went in there 2 missions in Afghanistan, eliminate the Taliban's control, neuter them, and get bin Laden. We did collapse the Taliban very quickly, and eventually we got bin Laden. But then we exited, and we got chased out, essentially, and we begged, please don't shoot us, and we'll give you this money and leave all this equipment. who's in charge now? So I say troops fought valiantly. Tactically, we may have kicked ass. And you did it, Assad. You had a great rep for kicking ass at altitudes nobody else did before. I read all the stories. I heard them all. You know, the radio intercepts about, hey, these guys fight like no other. Not even like other Marines. I mean, they're on our ass. You know, I don't know what the hell we're facing here, you know, and that was a testament to you. So I take nothing away from the troops, probably regimental and below. But the generals, I think they were all complicit. I'm not aware of one that threw his stars on the table and said, we're repeating the sins of Vietnam. What's the end state here? I think they went along to get along. And if a publicly traded executive is held accountable and he can be clawed back, if I had my way, there would be a tribunal, and everybody that didn't stand up and have a spine and challenge the lack of political guidance on this, like what are you sending us for? What do you hope to achieve? What are we doing for you guys? If you didn't do that, we're going to claw you back. So you retired as a 3-star, but it was you were a 1-star before you ever set foot there. So we're going to give you a 1-star. We should claw that back. And I know, you know, when General McCann picking on him because he wrote the book, and what you saw, this was a debacle. And he was in charge of it. You know, we're in charge of everything that does or does not happen. But when he wrote his book, did you see the litany of Marine generals? So, he's a great officer, did a magnificent, they just surrounded, and I mean some big names, just great. And if I had my way, a lot of those guys would be facing court-martials. You know what, Assad, and I'll get off it now. These guys are not stupid, and they are not inept. Some of them are premier warfighters. They know what to do. Right. But they were, when their nation needed them to have some balls, some moral courage, they shrank. And it disgusts me. And I can't even look at pictures of them. And with that, Colonel, I'll turn it over to you. And what else you got for? I'm not sure you're always getting ready to go on that tirade, you know, but I'm sorry, but I feel
it's on the money. I'll tell you what. I mean, I salute you. I mean, this is incredible. We're about 2.5 hours into this. So what I would request is, it's exactly as it should be. I mean, these words have to be spoken for the next generation. I think it's very important. And, but I still want to, get inside the Ettore brain about leadership, because I think that's also important, because we've told them, what the dark side is. Now we got to tell them what the light is, right?
I'd be happy to. And I want to say this again, as a little asterisk. These are Mike Ettore's opinions. And as you can see, as anybody that watches, I'm firmly convicted. And I'm well aware that there are people that are going to entirely disagree with part or everything that I said.
Right.
I'm okay with that. And so I expect when you post this, there may be some comments like, this guy is a dinosaur. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He wasn't there. Okay.
I think you're on the money. You're on the money.
I think so too. But my point is this. Why would I hold back and not speak my conscience?
Because you have grandchildren. You have grandchildren. It's really that simple. Exactly. That's why I'm doing it. I've got grandchildren. I don't want them to go through this. It's really that simple.
Right. So if we, in this discussion, which really, I'm sorry, turned into one-sided.
Oh, that's good.
If we can get those young NCOs and junior officers to think, and I didn't know that about those PMAs. And I didn't know that about the Vietnam, so maybe I should read about that. And you know what? If this is whatever the internet's going to look like 20 years from now, if this episode's out there, some young kid that isn't even born yet might watch this video and say, I might want to do some reading about this. I might want to do some reading so that if I ever get in a position like that, I realize there are some things much more important in my career, And it's the bodies of those young men and women that are not to be, we were always taught aside, you risk your Marines' lives, but you don't gamble with them.
Right.
And I think for 15 years in both theaters, we largely gambled with them. Okay. And I see these kids maimed, and I feel for them, you know what I mean? So anyway, That's my story. I'm sticking to it, and I
Well, I
welcome all
appreciate
critics.
I appreciate this very much. I'll contact you. We'll do the second part, which really is about the leadership portion, and I look forward to that. I appreciate your time. God bless, and Semper Fidelis. The truth
Semper
matters.
Fiat. Thank you very much, my
Thank
friend.
you. Thank you. So, as I mentioned at the outset, this is a fascinating episode about Mike's life as a Marine. And unfortunately, we don't have enough time to get into the second phase of his life when he joined the corporate world. And that's another fascinating experience. And then talk about his experiences and then also talk about the books that he wrote about leadership and what does he consider to be the key aspects of being a good leader, not only in the military but also in the corporate world. And Mike is definitely an expert in leadership, although he's very humble and won't claim that, but I certainly consider him to be one. So I look forward to the next episode with Mike Ettore. So thank you for watching. As always, stay united, stay rugged. Khan out.